Hi, I'm Jilly G. Welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how to make my version of a gluten-free Spanish spice bar cake, also known as a Spanish spice bar, Spanish spice cake, and I had a request for it quite a while ago from a viewer, and it's actually been a lot of fun researching this recipe. The grocery store chain that made this cake we didn't have here in Utah where I grew up. So besides seeing pictures of it, I've never seen this kind of cake before. And what it is it's a spice cake with raisins in it, and then it's kind of layered, like two-layer cake with just a basic vanilla icing. There's a lot of information out there. I encourage you, if you used to love this recipe, look it up online. There's so many different stories that you can find, and it's really kind of fun to research the history of this cake. So the first thing I'm going to do, well, the first thing I've already done is my oven is preheated to 325. I did toast about a half a cup of walnuts, and then I've got those chopped here. I have a greased 9x13 baking dish, and then I've also lined it with parchment paper, and then I buttered that too, just to make it easy to remove the cake out of the pan so we can cut it and stack it. This is my 4-quart saucepan. You don't need a saucepan this size, but because a lot of the ingredients are mixed right in the saucepan, I wanted to give myself enough room to stir everything around. So I've got 2 cups of water, and then 1 cup of raisins. And I want to bring this up to a boil. Now, if you don't like raisins, you can make this with prunes. I have a recipe, I think it was in my Fanny Farmer cookbook, or one of my other cookbooks, kind of an older cookbook, that it's called a spicy prune cake. Almost the exact same ingredients, except prunes instead of raisins. So we'll get to my dry ingredients first, and then I've got my hot pad here, so when that's ready I can bring it over to mix everything in. So I've got 2 cups of my gluten-free flour, and then I've got 1 teaspoon of baking soda, half a teaspoon of ground cloves, half a teaspoon of cinnamon, half a teaspoon of nutmeg, half a teaspoon of allspice, and a half a teaspoon of salt. All in there, and then just mix this together. Another interesting thing about this recipe is a lot of people will try and make a copycat version. And some people are very excited to get that copycat version just to find out it is not what they remember at all. And the reason for that is the bakery that these came from, I think it was called the A&P grocery store, something like that, Jane Parker Bakery. There's a couple of different names for it. Oh, I can hear my raisins boiling. Once they come up to a boil, I'm going to turn them down to a simmer for 10 minutes. And you don't even have to stir it around. If you don't like raisins, and I know some of you don't, and I know that you guys know that raisins aren't my favorite either, but making this recipe without raisins, I think it would be an interesting experiment because, first of all, the raisins, but there's a lot of liquid that is in the raisins. So make it with prunes. I would think some other kind of dried fruit, like dried cranberries might work. Something like that in place of the raisins to get your water ratio and the other ingredients correct. So many of the recipes I came across do not have nuts, or they have pecans. Walnuts seem to be a really popular one. Some people don't remember any nuts at all. Molasses. I'll be putting molasses in mine today. Some people never had molasses in that cake, or there was a really strong molasses flavor. Sometimes they put cocoa in this cake. It's really interesting, all of the variations. Some recipes don't have any eggs, but they have applesauce. So I kind of feel like this is a version of a depression cake, like my boiled raisin cake here on my channel, that was my great-grandma's recipe. Very similar ingredients. That recipe calls for cocoa. I'm not going to be using any cocoa today. I have a 1/4 cup of butter that I've cut up into little chunks. And then I also have a 1/4 cup of coconut oil. A lot of these recipes call for butter. A lot of them call for lard or a combination of both. Vegetable shortening, vegetable oil. So the main takeaway from this recipe is you can really just use whatever you've got. The bakeries that made this cake turned out a little bit differently every time. some of the history shows that people that worked in those bakeries would use different pieces of cakes that they had trimmed off and would add that to this cake batter. I find that really interesting. What a way to not waste anything. Which also explains why wherever you live, you might get a different version of this cake. So if you travel somewhere to Canada or the Midwest or somewhere else, you might not get the cake that you're used to at home. And I've also seen different variations of this recipe where you make it like a traditional cake, where you cream together your butter and your sugars, and then you just follow kind of a basic cake recipe. This one is a little bit different, where we mix it all in the saucepan. I've also seen recipes that use white sugar and brown sugar or a combination of both. I've seen recipes that a large portion of the sugar is molasses. So many different variations. And then of course you'll have my variation today that is gluten-free, not regular sugar, and coconut oil. So if you're hoping that this recipe will bring back a childhood memory, I don't know that it will. But I'm giving you a lot of good information that you can make your own and then maybe recreate what you had when you were little. Let me know. Let me know in the comments. So now that my raisins have been simmering for 10 minutes, I'm going to add in my 1/4 cup of butter. And I cut it up just to help it melt a little bit faster. And it is room temperature. And then my coconut oil. I'm not worried so much that my butter is melted, but I really want my coconut oil to be melted. In goes my 1/2 cup of honey. And I'm also going to add in, I've got 2 teaspoons of molasses. I've got 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And then I've got 2 eggs here in my bowl. I'm going to mix up with a fork. And because my pan is still really hot, I'm going to stir in my dry ingredients first. All in one. Now I'm going to pour and stir in my beaten eggs. And while I'm at it, my 1/2 cup of toasted chopped walnuts. And this method, it really is super fast and easy. Put it all in a saucepan. So bring over your prepared pan. You could make this recipe with 2 square cake pans. And if you don't care that this looks exactly like the original, you could use round cake pans. Don't even really have to level it out. Kind of leveled itself out. Okay, this goes in the oven again at 325 for about 30 to 35 minutes or until a toothpick comes out clean. I don't think it's done yet. It's only been 30 minutes. I think I'm going to go another 5 minutes. Another 5 minutes. Much better. I think that's what it needed. And it looks the exact same, although it looks a little bit drier and more cooked. I'm going to let this cool off completely. We don't want to frost a warm cake. And of course, it's really challenging to slice a warm cake and stack it on top of itself. So my cake is still really warm. I took it out of the pan and I kind of opened up my parchment paper here. It's not ready yet, but man, it sure smells good. And it looks really good too. So while I'm waiting for that to cool off, I'm going to get my icing going. If you noticed, I was using a really old mixer that was my grandma's, and it's old enough that I'm afraid it's going to give out. But my mom got me a new mixer, so thanks, Mama. So for my frosting, I'm just going to do not even really a frosting. It's just a 1/4 cup of cream cheese, a 1/4 cup of butter, and they are soft, room temperature, so I can mix them with my mixer. And then I'm using honey and vanilla. This will be a delicious frosting for my cake. But if you want to, just use your favorite vanilla buttercream. I want to whip together my butter and cream cheese and really get them creamed and fluffy before I add in my honey and vanilla. So once it looks like that, I'm gonna add in my 1/4 cup of honey. And even though I'm not ready to frost my cake at all, I like to get this done ahead of time. If for some reason it's really too soft and it's just kind of oozing everywhere, then I can have a chance to get it in the fridge and firm up a little bit before I'm ready to frost my cake. 1 teaspoon of vanilla. I'm going to scrape down the bowl and give it one more good mix. Scrape down the bowl, and then I'm going to cover this in plastic wrap and stick it in the fridge. It is a little bit softer than I want it to be. And the nice thing about an icing like this, if you feel like it really is too soft, you can always add in a little bit more butter or cream cheese and whip it the same way, and that should stiffen it up enough. But also sticking it in the fridge will do the job too. So my cake is completely cooled, and I ended up adding another 4 ounces of cream cheese to my frosting here. After having been in the fridge, it wasn't firming up the way I wanted it to. That extra cream cheese really gave me the consistency I wanted, and it tastes delicious. Let's bring over our cake, and you can see that having the parchment underneath the cake, it lifts out of the pan so easily, and then I can transfer it to my cutting board. I've got a bread knife here, and I'm just going to eyeball and cut my cake in half and then in half for each half. You could get a ruler and make it exact, but this is good. I've got a couple of plates here that I think will fit my cakes perfectly. And I'm going to very carefully remove 1/2, kind of put the edges onto the bottom of both of my cake plates. But look at that. Because it's such a thin cake, you really get a lot of raisins and walnuts in there. Now I'm going to use a little bit of my icing here, frosting, whatever you want to call it, cream cheese, butter, and honey. And I don't even really know the exact measurement of frosting for this. I guess it's partly up to you. And if you get a little bit of crumbs on your bottom layer, it won't really matter because it will be in between the cake layers. From the pictures that I've seen, it's actually a pretty thin layer of frosting between and on top of the cake. And we're not frosting the entire cake. If you were going to serve this for some kind of fancy dinner party dessert, I wouldn't really call this a fancy dessert. But if you were concerned that the bottoms of your cake will have the rounded corners from your cake pan, you could trim those off and make it look more uniform. I don't really care, but you could. Okay, so now we've got our bottom layers done. Very carefully put on our tops, line it up. And you know, it looks like I did a really good job of making them even. I'm going to do the same thing and just use up the rest of my frosting here. And I think this layer is okay if it's actually a little bit thicker because it's not going to be squished between 2 cake layers. Oh, got some cake in my frosting there. And again, going by the pictures of this cake, you can run a fork along the frosting here and give it kind of that signature look. Maybe. There we go. Look at that. I think they look really good. And it looks like I did a good job of getting even amounts of frosting between my layers. Except for this side. You can't really see it. But that's okay. From the pictures that I've seen, this is what it looks like. So I'm really happy with it. As for taste, I have no idea what the original tasted like or what it's supposed to taste like. But I think we'll be able to get a good idea. Clean off my knife of crumbs here. And let's cut ourselves a piece. I'm just going to use my fork here. Now I flipped it over the other side, so now I've got both of the ends of the cake. But that's all right, you get the idea. So let's give it a bite. And taking one for the team, I'm going to, first bite, go in with a raisin. a really good cake. So I have no idea if I have made this anywhere close to the original. I think I did a really good job with the appearance. I think it looks really close to the pictures, but the taste will be up to you. I will put the recipe, of course, in the description box below, but I encourage you to do your own research. It really is kind of fun to look at the history and read comments of other people and see what other people's recipes are like. Find one that you think matches what you remember this cake tasting like. Thank you to the viewer that suggested that I make this cake. I hope this is what you're looking for, and I hope that if it is not, that at least I've given you the tools to make it your own in your own kitchen and adjust the flavors to how you remember it tasting. And you know what I think the best thing would be is to go find somebody that maybe has had this cake before and let them do a taste test. Have you ever heard of a Spanish spice bar cake?
No.
Or just a Spanish spice bar?
I imagine it's hot.
Well, it's not. It's more spicy, like Christmas spices, like cinnamon and cloves.
Oh, very.
You want to come closer? So, does it look familiar? Of course, it's homemade, but does it look like anything you've seen before?
Not me,
It
no.
looks like that cake we had a while back.
It does look like a carrot cake.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I wanted to come and ask you guys is because we never had these in Utah.
Oh.
But you were a truck driver that maybe in all of your travels you would have seen these, and then you lived in Chicago. So I thought maybe you would have had them at your grocery stores.
I don't recall ever
Well,
seeing.
I remember. I don't remember when exactly, but I remember they always put toothpicks in there so that it wouldn't stick to the.
That's exactly what I did. Toothpicks so it wouldn't stick to the plastic wrap.
Yeah.
So we're not going to eat the toothpicks, but you want a piece? It's got raisins in it.
Yeah. I have a little piece.
So, oh, that didn't do a very good job. I'll eat that end piece there. So one of the things about it is, did you ever hear of the bakery called an A&P bakery or a Jane Parker bakery?
I worked at the A&P when I was in high school.
So A&P is where they had these cakes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
I worked as the cashier. And in those days, it wasn't like now. In those days, you'd get a loaf of bread and you had to decide how much it would cost. Then you punch in the numbers. And potatoes you put on the scale and then figure out how much they were a pound.
Okay, here's your cake. Here's your cake. And I'll have the small piece.
Do you know what the A&P stands for?
What?
Atlantic and Pacific.
Atlantic and Pacific.
Yeah.
Huh.
And
Wow.
it was a fairly big store, and they had produce, of
Well,
course.
it was about like Safeways or
Something like that.
that.
Yeah. I
And,
didn't know you worked at A&P.
Yeah, I was the cashier.
Yeah.
And, of course, in those days, there was no plastic.
Uh-huh.
They give you $10, and then the bill would be $8, so then you had to give them the change, count it back, and things were a little different.
Yeah, I'd say so. Well, somebody requested that I make this cake, and I was researching it, and it was at the A&P grocery stores or the Jane Parker bakery. And it was called a Spanish spice cake or a Spanish spice bar because you make it in a 9x13, cut it in half, cut those in half, and stack it.
Huh.
Everyone that had these growing up would look for the recipe, and then they were disappointed when they tried to make it. But then some of the information said that in the bakery, they would take whatever cake pieces were left and throw it into the cake batter of this cake, and then make the cake. So it would be different wherever you went anyways.
Oh,
So, what do you think of it?
that was very tasty.
It kind of reminds me of a boiled raisin cake, but Sean thought it tasted more like a carrot cake. But there's no carrots in it.
No. It's very good.
Mm-hmm. So I think, even though it has raisins in it, I think it's really good.
And it has nuts in it.
It does. It has walnuts in it.
Even though it had raisins.
Even though, that's why I brought it here. Because I knew you would love it.
Well, it's like the raisins is what made it.
That's right. So I thought maybe even if you didn't remember the name of it, you might see that it kind of looks familiar. Because this is what the cake looked like.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. First, I have to admit that when I was a child, the bakery in a grocery store was kind of an afterthought because people did their own baking just because that's
Interesting.
the way they grew up. And now, you know, you go in and they have birthday cake, anniversary, and, you know. But when I was a child, most women were at home, and so they baked.
That would make sense. I never even thought about that because everyone made bread. Well, even you did.
Yeah.
You made all of your bread and all of that for your kids. So it would make sense.
There's a different era, and it isn't any better, and it isn't bad. It's just a different era. Well, I don't remember ever having a boughten cake because my mother baked every Saturday. She made a lot of strudel and cookies. You know, and I think that might be that I'm sure they had
It's got nuts in it.
Walnuts.
Yeah.
Walnuts are in it.
I'm sure they had an area in the store, but it might have been a little smaller.
Yeah, and I think one of the parts that I was reading said that these were kind of on the end caps of the aisles, and so not really even in a bakery section of a grocery store. Now, it doesn't taste like a boiled raisin cake to me at all.
No,
But
it me.
It has a lot of the same ingredients as the boiled raisin cake. And you boil the raisins. And so I thought it's kind of around that time frame. And then there's so many different variations on this recipe that some people put cocoa, and the boiled raisin cake has a little bit of cocoa in it.
Yeah.
So I thought it was interesting. I was hoping that maybe you would know what it was, but I didn't know that you worked at the A&P anyways.
See, now, Grandma, you know, Dad's mom, boiled raisin cake was the family favorite, and I don't imagine Grandma bought much from bakeries either. You know, they just did.
The only thing I remember going when I was a kid, my mother would say, "Donald, I want you to get on your bicycle. I want you to go down to the dairy, and bring home some churned ice cream." So, with a long face, I would get on my bicycle and I would ride down the hill into town, and then I would go over where the dairy was, and I would get a little cardboard container full of this ice cream.
What was that called?
Brick ice cream.
Was that called hand dipped or something?
Oh yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was
But-
different.
Okay.
Later on, they made it in bricks, you know, and then you could go down and buy a brick. But then it got to be, nobody wanted brick ice cream. It was too hard, and it was cold. So pretty soon they started leaning back towards the hand dipped.
Yeah.
And they would have to get down into it. You never did it, but they would dip down there with a scoop, and they would put it in that box, and then you know, it had a little clip on it so that it would stay closed. And then I would pedal my bicycle down under the railroad pass and up the hill and across till I got home.
Where was that? Was that
Idaho
in
Falls.
Idaho Falls?
Yep, that was a great place.
But it's been a lot of fun to research just all the different histories. Some of the recipes have nuts, some don't. But I think it's really good, even though it has raisins. So, what do you think? Do you like it?
I think I like it a lot. It reminds me of a carrot cake without the carrots.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I think the ingredients are similar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is good, and the frosting is delicious.
You know, the term similar was becoming a natural part of the English language.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my dad, whenever he wanted to talk about something like that, he'd say, well, it's similar to this other thing. I don't know how old he got before he started using the word similar, but he was always, it's similar.
When you bake this, what did you do? Bake it and put the frosting and then put it on top?
So you bake it in a 9x13, and then I cut it in half, and then I cut each of those in half.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the fanciest. You can kind of see if I had done a better job at trimming it, it might look a little nicer. And then this isn't really even frosting. It's cream cheese, butter, honey, and vanilla. Isn't it good though?
Oh, that is good.
It's not even really a frosting.
Well, then what did you do? Frost it and then...
Yep, cut it into kind of the long bars, and then put a little bit of the frosting, and then the other. Here, let's see. I'll show you a picture of what it looks like. The pictures I could find. So.
Oh, well, look at that, honey.
There's the picture. So it looks not exactly, but pretty darn close.
Oh, yeah.
I could try and show you, but I don't know that you'd be able to see over there. But
it's not exactly the same, but it's similar.
It is similar. It is very similar.
Oh, well, that...
So then the A&P original.
But they call it a Spanish cake.
A Spanish spice bar or just a Spanish bar cake. And it does have spices, but some people that would make the recipe, it's not what they remember as a kid.
It
No.
tastes spicy.
It's got a lot of spices in it. It's got cinnamon and nutmeg and allspice and cloves.
Well, and I think the name Spanish, like me, I was thinking of hot peppers and chili and all, and I thought, wow. So, but there's all different ways of putting spices in, Well, it's delicious. I'm glad whoever you are that you had her make this.
Me too. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm glad I could share it with you guys.
Well, we're all having a sharing good time.
We are having a sharing good time.
Notice the empty plate.
Even mine is empty. You better get to it, or he'll probably help you finish it off.
Yeah. Well, I've been doing the talking.
You don't have to lick the saucer if you don't want to, but if you do, it's okay.
It is okay if you want to lick it.
Yeah.
All right, well.
Yeah, it's delicious.
I'm glad you like it. Well, thanks for letting me come over and share my cake with you, and thanks for telling me your stories.
Well, thanks a million times for coming.
Anytime. Well, let's wrap up. We'll say goodbye to everybody.
Okay.
Well, goodbye.
Goodbye now.
I know that you enjoy my little princess videos, but she's all mine.
Well, so. You guys are all mine. And everybody loves you guys. So, a lot of love going on here.
No, it was very, very nice.
It is nice. Well, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. And we'll see you on the next one. Bye.
I remember.
What do you remember?
I remember I used to go to I lived in Idaho Falls. Idaho Falls is 50 miles from Pocatello.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to, sometimes when we were going some places in the car, we would stop at Pocatello and go to Aunt Ethel and Uncle, what the heck was his name? Oh, I think of his name. But anyway, we would stop at her house,
Mm-hmm.
and if she knew we were coming, she would make a great big chocolate cake about that big around,
Mhm.
about that thick.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to think that was the best cake that anybody had ever made.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it was just really something special.
Are you trying to tell me you want a chocolate cake for your birthday?
Well,
We'll
Yeah.
see if we can find that chocolate cake and I'll make it for you.
well, that's something to look forward to.
Okay, well now we need to say goodbye again because we kept talking. This time we're really leaving.
Oh, yeah. Maybe those folks need to be going home.
Maybe. See you next time.
Oh boy.